Thank you, Brian.
All right, good news, audience. This is all about you, user experience. Companies and strategists are focused on you. And Mark, to start things off, I wanted to get you to give us an overview. You jumped in the world of what was then new media back in 1994.
Yeah.
Now we're 2018. Digital world and the physical world are sort of becoming more and more joined in the user experience. You publish every year, a trends report. Maybe you could give us like kind of a big picture look on where we are and where we're going ahead from based on your trends for 2018 report that you did for FJORD.
So if I was to single out, we have 7 trends this year we've highlighted. There is a sort of meta theme across all of them, which we call tension. So we think that there is palpable, geopolitical tension at the moment between in versus out, open versus closed, fake versus true. But we also see those tension in the trends between things like physical versus digital, man versus machine, speed versus creativity, that's a big one. And those tensions are palpable through all the trends. If I was to single out maybe 2 or 3, then one would be the way in which digital and physical are combining together at the moment. And our strongly held view is that this is a year when we have to stop viewing digital and physical as separate things when we think about the design process and begin to conceive of both at the same time and in the same moment when we're thinking about the services and products that we want to take into market or improving the services and products that are there already. That twins pretty well with the second trend we've talked about, which is we call computers have eyes. And the backstory here is a really big one, which is, some time ago, computers became good at looking at text and reading them through the command line interface and beyond. Then, about 5 years ago, certainly in public consciousness, computers became good at listening to things and understanding what they were listening to, or fairly good, Siri and now Alexa. And now what's happening is computers getting very good at looking at things and understanding, making sense of the patterns they're looking at, and that's massive. If you're an amoeba and you could suddenly see and understand what you were looking at, you're taking a big evolutionary jump. Well, that's exactly where we are. So we see that as very big as well. If I was to pick out one more, it would really be, well, maybe 2 just very quickly. One is one we call the ethics economy. So we think things have changed big time around how companies relate to politics. And we're seeing a shift where companies are no longer making pronouncements about things which are all about their bottom line and about their business interests, but they're now actively engaging in making political stances on things. And even from a cynical point of view, if you don't believe they're doing it because customers are asking for it, which we think they are, they're doing it because, in the words of one high-level person I spoke to recently, they don't think they'll be able to employ the kind of people they want to employ within the next 5 years unless they get engaged with that. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about at the moment.
That last point, if a company, and in the US, it feels very polarized. I guess there's increasing polarization in a lot of parts of the world, in Europe as well, but there have been so many hot button issues and something happens and a company feels like they have to come down on it because they feel like they have to send a signal to their customers and possibly to their employees and their future talent. But do they also then translate that into their user experience and the way they communicate who we are, not just like coming out and making a statement about this one event. We disagree with this policy so much, but like we believe in this set of things.
They absolutely have to. That's why it's a design issue. There is absolutely no choice. If you're going to go out there and make statements about, just for example, gender equality,
right,
then you have to fulfill that in your experience.
And how do you, that's a challenge though, to like weave that into that user experience, that interaction without it being feeling clunky. It has to be, it has to feel seamless.
Yeah, I think it does. and it has to be allied to, I think, a genuine purpose which is deeply rooted in the organization and actually has to come from the employees and some of the key stakeholders, as opposed to being top-down driven by the CEO. I think the other challenge, and probably the biggest challenge on this, is less making it flow through the experience. I think that's a must-do. It's actually, you talked about the tension in your country. So in my country, we have something called Brexit going on, which is creating an enormous
amount
of... Yep, you've heard of it.
Yeah.
It's creating an enormous amount of tension, and don't even get me started on my views. The point is this. The people, I am against Brexit. The people who are pro-Brexit, many of them hold sincere and passionate views. So if you make, as an organization, you make an anti-Brexit statement, you're actually also making a statement which is denying the strongly held ethical views of 52% of the country.
Right.
That's a fairly challenging thing to do. So this ethics economy trend is not an easy one to negotiate at all, or navigate.
Right. And I want to get back in a minute to the physical digital connection, and the computers have eyes, which sounds a little creepy and scary, but we know they do. We know they're listening. But let's go to you for a second, Fujiyo. You create digital marketing solutions for clients. How has the expectation of level of users evolved, and how do you adapt your design of these solutions to satisfy that and to keep, tantalizing them with new experiences?
Well, so probably it's better to, tell the company history, because, digital marketing, world has been changing dramatically.
Yes.
We set up a company in the United States in 1998, transferred headquarters to Japan, 1999, went to IPO 2008. We've been in this market, digital marketing world, about 20 years. First, the reason why we, our growth was we are the advocator of, so new designer, so-called IA, not AI. That is the information architect. The designer is kind of, I don't want to get controversial, but there is some classical designer, so painting and making beautiful and copywriting. IA is the information architect because we are web integrator. So our customers are huge. We make a web couple of thousand pages, totally static pages. IA designer develop design the structure of the web so that the user can find easily what they want. So they are like architect or designer of a huge, tall building. It's not a two-story house. I'm not talking about which designer is good or bad, but we need this architect because we create a huge web. So these people contribute to users so that they can find easily what they want. It's like design to put in some bathroom, to put elevator, to put an emergency exit in a tall building, or design a huge mall. These designers design the human traffic line in a mall so that each store can get a better sales result. So there's the architect we had. However, web is no longer closed. The things. Web is connected to a database. Web is connected to advertising. Web is connected to social media, and deliver a whole bunch of total, the several, the user touch point. So, so now IA need to design entire, organization, entire customer journey, touch point. So, these are the architects to design, connected the real with digital. So that's the kind of transition of the designer in the past 20 years.
You're talking about IA, not AI, but is AI now part of IA?
No,
Make it more
no. IA is still IA. IA is the name of the designer, but AI contribute tremendously amount to our, how we can design the whole value chain, because now so this is totally data-driven work. AI contribute to so that we now have data scientists. They analyze the huge bunch of data in the past, get some pattern to apply the future. AI is the things. AI as a technology, AI technology has not been changing so much in the past 30 years, I would say.
Right.
So just two components contribute to AI make things happen. That is size of the data and the speed of analysis. That's it. But however, these are really important things to get the, so now we can get some pattern, formula, by analyzing the past data and to apply the future so that we understand the user more and more.
Are we at a point now, or are we at a point soon where AI will start to really be more transformative in this process? I mean, you said it hasn't, there's been a long sort of AI winter. Now there's been a lot of AI hype for the last couple of years, and we're starting to see it implemented in all kinds of ways. But are you seeing it start to really get a lot of traction and taking on these tasks, the data management that's repetitive and doesn't really need to be done by a human?
Well, it has been existing, so in the past, the data mining, there's a bunch of data mining company to understand, what the user want.
Right.
But however, AI does not create new things. AI does not create, what user do not understand. AI cannot pick the, some aha moment. AI just create you and develop, provide you what user behaved in the past. So AI is already integrated to a bunch of tools like marketing automation. Human will create scenario, that's a human's work. And to put the scenario into the tools, and the tool automatically understands the past behavior to apply, make the scenario better and better.
Mm-hmm. Sanjay, I'd like to turn to you for a second. Wealth management, the wealth management business, I think for most people conjures an image of sitting down with a sophisticated, articulate person like yourself who's knowledgeable and talking about how you're going to manage your money. How do you translate that feeling that you want of trust into the digital realm, into a digital relationship with your customer? What are the key factors in that user experience so that it's an extension of that personal connection?
Yeah, sure. So I'll put some context to the wealth industry. 5 years ago, by the way, can I just ask this question? I mean, who enjoys their experience around banking today? Who really enjoys it?
Everyone's afraid to raise their hand.
So
they're like, it's not cool if I like my bank.
And I go through this on a day-to-day basis, and I love that question because it boils down to whether it's retail or whether it's wealth, how do you build that trust and relationship with the client? I know we have technology, and I know we have AI, and I know we have blockchain, and I know we have lots of those. But do you think that you as a client care? You care about the experience. You care that every single channel that you use, whether it is a call that you make to your advisor or a call center, or whether you fill up a form or whether you get insights, it is relevant to you. So what we're finding is that clients are getting younger, they're getting richer, faster. They compare their experiences with other organizations, whether it may be a Disney or whether it may be an Airbnb or even an Uber, but they're fairly conservative about growing and protecting and transferring their wealth. Money is an emotional topic. So the advisor becomes a key part of this relationship. Yes, I'm in digital, and we create great digital interfaces, but unless you bring the content that makes it relevant for the client, makes it intuitive, and gives them insights, regardless of the channel, they will think it's a waste of time to interact with.
What do you find, what are your clients, what insights do they crave? What have you optimized for that connects with users?
So let's take a couple of examples. The concept of security and money. One might say on the digital channel, if I give you 6 dongles, that seems fairly secure, but it also seems inconvenient. And now with the new technology where you can actually log in through your fingerprint and find a better way to connect with the client, that creates what I call convenience and some element of trust when you actually engage with the bank. On a daily basis, we actually have AI tools that scan the portfolios of our clients and then give them advice the following day which parts of that portfolio are out of whack. That's still not good enough because they want to understand how the market has changed and what further opportunities you can give them to actually make more money. So technology is great, but how you make it intuitive, how you solve that problem, and then what insights you can actually give them on a daily basis through your advisor as your primary channel, that is not going to change.
I'm curious, if you give a suggestion or a piece of advice to a client digitally versus face-to-face or over the phone, what's the trust level? Do you have any research to show, like, if the algorithm suggests, hey, you should look at this, do they trust that? Or do they feel like, well, that could be generic? Whereas if you call them, and has that changed over time?
You need to build that experience. Forget about the word design. You need to build that experience regardless of the channel. The fact that you ask that question means that you may think it may be doubtful and you don't know whether what you're reading is in fact you understand. And again, if money is an emotional topic, you would pick up the phone and speak to someone. Mm-hmm. And that's the trend we're seeing. Give me the insights, let me ponder over it, but give me the opportunity to call you any time of the day so I can interact. If you take another example of, again, technology and user experience, you try this experiment with voice on Siri versus Amazon. Yes, you can ask the question any time of the day and interact with your bank, but before you press the button to act, wouldn't it be great if I could speak with somebody who can relate it to my need of the past and my generation for the future, so I know how much to put aside and where to make that call to action. You got to build it in the physical and digital world regardless of that channel.
So going back to that, we're going back to that theme of the physical and digital world and the connection, the user experience. And Mark, I'm wondering if, I'd love to just explore that theme a little bit. What's an example of how that's changing, how user experience design is changing and evolving to connect the two, and where it's making things better? Yeah,
I can think of a couple of examples. So there is a kind of backstory to this, I believe, which is back in the mid-2000s, the mobile phone began to eat everything. Mm-hmm. So it ate lots of other technologies. It ate the screen, it ate the keyboard, it ate the mouse, it ate alarm clocks, it ate cameras.
It ate attention spans?
Yes, it ate attention spans.
Social interaction between people?
I'm talking about technology, but you're right, it ate that too. Yeah. That's a whole different ballpark of game. It ate GPS devices, it just ate everything. Yep. And now what's happening is, if you think about it, it's spitting them back out again. And Amazon have really been the world leader at this, and Google are coming along in their wake. But if you think about Echo, effectively Echo is a speaker and a microphone, and that's it. Now, I don't know how many of you have an Echo device in your house. I have two, I have one in the kitchen. So the one in the kitchen, I began to realize the other day, has actually just faded away into the background. It's just kind of disappeared. I can go home, I'm going home tonight, been away for 2 weeks. My son could have moved it around the kitchen, it doesn't really matter. I don't need to know where it is. Whereas I started my career in radio, I still love radio. I have a radio in the kitchen. I have to go and touch it and press buttons, so I know exactly where it is at any given moment. I have to physically interact with it. What I think is happening, and Echo is just an example of this, but it's a good one, is that physical and digital are blending together. And that, I think, is and we're seeing that the Echo is a good example of that, but we're seeing it begin to happen in our cars as well. We'll see it in other environments as well. But the home and the car, the two places to watch. And just picking up on your point, this is also driven by a bit of a sociological backlash as well against staring at small glowing rectangles all the time, which is exactly what you were talking about. And there are this is not just a dialogue we're having in our homes, especially if we have children. It's actually something that's also playing out in the media, and it's playing out with research. So the University of Florida published some research late last year, and this is amongst many stats I could use, which showed that teenage girls in particular are prone to higher levels of depression and, I'm afraid to say, suicide, and that correlates against their use of screen time. So we have both a kind of sociological need to move to a place where we let go of the devices, but also the technology beginning to appear that can do that. And lastly on this, I think it's a price point thing as well. So the required cost to actually have physical devices, which take some of the load bearing off the screen, is getting to a point where large organizations can begin to invest in those and innovate around them. Disney Magic Man is probably the first good example of that. Carnival Cruises, which is a client of ours, so I'm familiar with it, biggest cruise ship in the world, they're launching something called the Medallion this year, which will be a small device that their customers wear, which will curate their experience on board. So they couldn't be doing that unless the ubiquity of bandwidth was there and the price point of buying these things and having them designed for them got to a level where they go, you know what, this is worth the investment per customer.
Curate their experience by just tracking where they go or making suggestions proactively, like, hey, we think, we see that you like to go to the casino a lot on board the ship, and here's some free tokens.
So one that would appeal to me particularly would be you get on board the boat and you have a very fine Negroni in the first bar you go to, and the next night when you go to another bar, because loads of bars on these boats, the barman there is aware of the fact that you've had a Negroni the night before and is prepared to mix you one. Now, that might sound pretty stupid, but I flew here on Singapore Air, and I've never flown Singapore Airlines before. I had an amazing experience. It was just world class. The best I've ever seen from an airline, actually. All of it was about the personal experience. And it was little touches that aggregate together to make you go, that works for me. And here I am telling loads of people about it.
Yeah, and Singapore thanks you. Fujiyo, are there any examples that jump out to you of this melding of the digital and the physical and the user experience and that sort of delight the user?
To create a best user experience design, so best way to do is to understand the users. Then the question is how to understand the users. It's data. Now, so we have a whole bunch of touch point. We can get some unique data from each touch point. For example, when you look at the website, so the cookie ID, so-called cookie ID is applied automatically to a person or device. So we can track down the cookie ID, but however, and also it's really important to get the data and connect the data, unique data, among various things. So cookie data or social media, you use your maybe real name and email address. When you combine, connect these data, when you look at the website, server side from brand side, we understand so what you are looking at. But just with a cookie ID, it's a combination of number and sign and alphabet. But when you connect the cookie with the social media, we understand who is actually looking at, automatically, not a human eye. So that's the beauty of the connection of the data. You can get the first-party data by yourself, that is from your own data, but if you connect the data with third-party data, that is, we analyze, so the past pattern of the cookie, then we would understand what you looked at. For example, so all the flowers and the fashions, maybe this cookie would be a female. If you look at the whole porn things, could be male, sometimes some exception, but we would understand in the demography, and we also can connect with this cookie with the credit card and the point, and sometimes the recruiting agency. Then we would understand this cookie how rich they are. So that gives us to understand who is. What is a customer, what is the users, who they are. Then we can provide more dynamic contents to provide the appropriate contents through the web, through the advertising, through the social media. That's the beauty of the digital marketing, so that we understand the users to create best of best user experience design.
I kind of want a cookie now for I just want to remind everyone that we have a hand over here. So if we could wait for a mic, I was going to open it up to questions, and we have some ready to go. Just remember to identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Andrew Brown from the Marketing Society. So I guess this question is for Mark as well as the rest of the panel. So you cited that University of Florida study, and you mentioned screen time, and I wonder to what extent screen time, the term is interchangeable with social media, and to what extent that we as consumers have obviously a choice, but as designers, do we have a responsibility? And this is the whole conversation around the design ethics and responsibility, and we touched on this a bit last night, so I just want to throw that to the panel.
Thank you.
So the first part of the question is I think the two are very interchangeable, because if you look, social media consumes an enormous amount of our screen time. So they are combined. There's no question. And also there are issues with social media. For example, I mean, the huge and obvious problem with social media is in the old days, if somebody, was deeply insulting to me, I could go around and hit them on the head with a stick. But I don't know. I never did that, by the way.
Well, you could have.
Actually, I did at school, but and people did it to me too. And so you pretty rapidly learn when you've got a bleeding nose that it pays not to be deeply insulting to people who are of physical proximity to you. The issue with social media is, no one knows where you are or who you are. And we know the consequences of that. On the ethics thing, I think it's absolutely right that as designers, we're going to have a big conversation over the next 3 to 5 years and beyond about design ethics. And I know people in FJORD, in my organization, who said that they believe when we were collecting the trends, a couple of people said, we can see the rise of chief ethics officers. And I think if that happens, I think chief ethics officers would look at the experience and want to dabble in that and say, are we actually doing something ethical here? But I think this issue is not going to go away.
Yeah, that's a fascinating idea, the designing ethically, because we know the addictive power of technology. We know the reach you can have with technology and the intimate relationship that the technology has with you because it knows so much about you. I mean, as FJORD is part of Accenture now, is that a conversation that you hear in your conversations with executives? Are they worried about drilling down to that level of engagement? Definitely.
I mean, Accenture has been saying some stuff at the World Economic Forum for the last 2 years, which is very strongly about the need for organizations begin to examine at a deep level their purpose and begin to actually measure themselves against the social impact and the good impact they have in the world. So absolutely, I mean, I'm, personally super comfortable with the things that they're beginning to say and do.
Yeah, I think I'd like to add to that. I think these are called opportunities. How do you translate an opportunity? So in the case of social, when we look at it, you cannot ignore it. And so it becomes, is it a followership that we're creating? And if it's a followership, how do we get our clients to understand the meaning behind this followership and who perhaps they like to select to follow, right? Particularly when it comes to investments. I think on the ethics side, I've seen a growth in terms of doing the right thing from an investment point of view in terms of sustainability and energy and so on. So that becomes an opportunity for a target segment to make sure it's intimate and relevant when you present options for them, investment options for them. So I think that there's the word ethics and social are opportunities for us to think about how it impacts the client experience.
Fujiyo?
Well, what is the best user experience design? It's the same as a human relationship, brand and user. If so, the name of the flower your wife knows, you would present the flower, and the wife would like you more to create a more intimate relationship. That's digital marketing can do. So we understand you. That's the best way to do.
Great. Well, there's so much more we'd love to cover, but unfortunately our time has run down. But that was a really fascinating conversation. Join me in thanking all of our panelists.